Hello and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Burn. I'm your host, Eric Miller. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. I've been doing a lot of, obviously, up to election day, I've been featuring a lot of candidates, right? Talking about their platforms and so forth. But now post election, I get into more issues and things like that, and environmental issues, racial justice, social justice, and so forth. So, that kind of really starts with the story of Emmett Till. And I recently came across a petition where one of the perpetrators, if you will, is still can potentially face justice, and I want to talk about that. So I reached out to the Emmett Till Legacy Foundation, of which Deborah Watts is the co-founder, executive director, and my guest for today. How you doing, Deborah?
Thank you for having me, Eric. I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
doing
you for
well. Fine.
yeah, thank you for the work you do and for setting up this foundation. And he's Emmett was your cousin. Am I right about that?
That's correct. Yes. Our great-grandfathers were brothers. Joe
No.
Smith, my great-grandfather, and George Smith, his great-grandfather.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I obviously I wanted to share his story a little bit just for just people probably generally know, but we should share it to some extent. And I'm certainly aware that he's his family, and I'm sure you've shared it a million times, and you can share as much detail or as little as you like. Can you give us kind of a thumbnail of Emmett's story, if you would?
Yes. Well, Emmett at age 14, very vibrant young man. And as customary with a lot of families in the South, he was living in Chicago, went to visit relatives in Mississippi for the summer. And he was there with other cousins having a wonderful time and happened to visit a grocery store called Bryant Meat and Grocery Market. And there he bought items and exited the store. And when he exited the store owner was retreating out for whatever reason, and he whistled at her. Um, Age 14, with his cousins, he whistled, and no one really understood why he would do that. But it startled everyone. They went back, home to the home of Mose Wright. And Mose Wright is actually his great, let's see, it would have been his great aunt's husband. So
Okay.
his grandmother's sister
Right. Right.
was married to Mose Wright. At any rate, he was about 3 days later, he was kidnapped by at
Mhm.
least two of the murderers that were actually brought to trial. But he was kidnapped, he was beaten, he was lynched. He was taken some 30 some miles to different sites in Mississippi, in the Delta area of Mississippi, where they took him to a barn and beat him and shot him in the head, tied a 75-pound cotton gin fan around his neck, and he was eventually thrown into the Tallahatchie River. Now, two of those murders, and there were more people involved, but two of them were arrested and were brought to trial, and they were acquitted of the murder. It didn't take long; it was about 19 days of from the murder and the discovery of his body to the date of the trial,
Mm.
and they were acquitted. And then this happened in 1955, so 65 years ago. And it was on August 28th, 1955, that he was actually murdered.
Mm.
Um, After the trial and the acquittal of the murderers, they sold their story to Look magazine in 1956 and were paid for that story. They embellished a few things there that I've discovered later.
Mm.
But they were paid, they confessed to what they did and why they did it, for instance. But, that was all for a reason, too. We were discovering that William Bradford Huey was writing a book and trying to put together something for a movie.
Mm.
So there are a lot of things that happened back in 1955 with Emmett's murder that we're still trying to uncover. anyone that's still alive. And we do believe that Carolyn Bryant, who was the store owner, or the wife of one of the store owners that he whistled at, that she's still alive and was responsible for sharing her story and being there to identify Emmett. And so right now we're looking for justice, for him, and wanting to make sure that the perpetrators and those that are alive are brought to justice, even 65 years later.
Yeah, here, and Godspeed on that work. I'm gonna
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna pull up the website in a minute, and I'll mention it several times as we go. So you have a text campaign, and there's a petition. Just text Emmett to 243725, and I'll
That's
put it in the
correct.
comments. It'll be in the description and everything, and I'll mention it several times. But Emmett to 243725. And thanks for sharing that story. Let me. This might be a hard question, but obviously you're a co-founder of this organization. You grew up hearing, he was far older than you. I'm assuming there's no way you ever met him, but I'm sure you were aware of him in the family. You know, uh, can we humanize him a little bit, right? I've seen that picture my whole life, and like, what a sweet boy. And then you see the unspeakable, right?
Yeah.
Can you, and if this is too personal, just tell me to shut the hell up. But like, can you can you humanize him? Can you describe him? Like, how was he remembered in the family?
Well, and that's the beauty of this, is that we do get a chance to humanize him, because he was a vibrant 14-year-old that was coming into his own. He was helpful to his mom. He was popular. He had friends. Most of those friends were family, because we had a pretty close knit family in Chicago. When people migrated from Mississippi, they ended up in Summit, Illinois, or Argo, Illinois. And we even have relatives on one street there that, whenever we have family reunions, we'd visit. But I was a toddler at the time when Emmett was murdered, but I heard the stories. But it was such a loss, of his future, of the chance for his mother to see him grow up, everything that she poured into him, was gone. And so those are the things that we try to preserve, his memory, legacy. But he loved to cook, he loved to uh, clean, shop. He was pretty independent. Just the two of them. After his father died, and his father was actually in the service in the army, I believe. It was just he and his mom.
Mm.
So you can just imagine 1955, being that he was in Chicago, the big city, and she would allow him to go and shop and pick up items, do, Christmas shopping and other things. And those are the wonderful stories that I heard about him. His nickname was Bobo. And he was kind of spoiled, as a young man, but he had swag, if you will. He
Right.
had swag, he had style. And, when you saw pictures of him at 14, with the hat, the tie, he was dressed, impeccably, and he loved to dress. Loved pork chops, loved comfort food, those kind of things. Loved his family as well. And he was a jokester, from my older cousins that I talked to, they said he loved to tell jokes, he loved to pull pranks, but he loved to have fun. He loved sports. He wanted to be a police officer at one time.
Wow.
He called it a motorcycle police. And baseball. As well. So
Right.
yeah, he was a vibrant young man, and thank you for asking that, because
Mhm.
a lot of times people dwell on his demise,
Mhm.
but that is part of who he was, and he was a vibrant young man, ready to just live his life at age 14.
That's amazing. Yeah, that picture behind you is just such a glorious photo, right? And you know, juxtaposed with the other, right? And I like to focus on that one. And thanks for sharing that about him and sort of giving him three dimensions, right? The fact that he traveled to Mississippi independently shows a certain amount of adventurism and so forth, right? So, and obviously his mom, I think, to paraphrase Dave Chappelle, was gangster, right? Which in his passing, talk about, you know, um, her, I mean, obviously the grief is one thing, but without her, having the open casket, this story could have been one of many and faded away. Can you
Yeah.
talk about, what that really meant to pardon the words, but to keep him alive, right?
Yes. Well, I think, Mamie Till Mobley, his mother, just she's my shero. And so seeing how she turned her tragedy to triumph and how she didn't want to allow America or the world to forget her son. It was a sacrifice for her, and I think she eventually came to that point to admit, that he was like it was like a sacrificial lamb, that God had given her, this young man. But God also put her at a place of whether it's grief to power, exerting her power. Because can you imagine in 1955 a woman who usually women, especially African American women, were relegated to service, maybe someone's kitchen, taking care of someone else's children,
Right, right.
and so she stood, for her son, stood up for justice, and then I think sought out the media to be a partner, with her to push
Amazing.
forward justice for her son. So there's
Yeah.
so many things that she did without any blueprint, without having anyone else to I guess mentor her. She's the mother of the movement as far as I'm concerned, in terms of standing there, standing for justice, pushing for justice, requesting it, demanding it, and then also partnering with um, local legislators there, and then asking for even the president of the United States to take action. She had expectations. She expected there to be an apology. She expected the world to be outraged just as she was. She expected truth, transparency, and accountability.
Right.
And what's so odd about that is those are the same things we expect today. But when she
Right.
stood there, demanded that casket to be open, uh, going way beyond her grief, turned her pain, to triumph. It woke up the world. I think it provided a level of consciousness for America that, if a mother like that through her grief can do that, then what else should we be pushing forward towards? So,
Yeah.
and we all know that December 1st, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and those, they started the bus boycott in Montgomery. So I think it was a clarion call for people to stand up for justice for themselves and for democracy and for those others in America, and also for Emmett.
Yeah. Here, and you just think, had those photos not been published in Jet, right? So it was Jet that ran them first. Shame on Look magazine for their, I don't know the sequence, but I'm assuming Jet probably ran first and then the Look magazine thing. But if I mean that's kind of the contemporary version of a cell phone video, and to put it into modern times, right? Like, had
Yes.
we not seen that, had the world not seen that, then it could have just faded away, no matter how vigorous she was in her pursuit of justice, right? So that was the thing that really drew attention to it, drew eyes to it. Can you just talk about that? I mean, in your work, the that is analogous to modern cell phone videos, and we still do see modern lynchings, like with the frequency that's just obscene. Can you just talk about that from your perspective? What does I mean, it's inexplicable, and how do you put that into words?
Um, and are you referring to what's happening today?
Yeah, just yeah, like
Just
today we see the Emmett Jet magazine photos in video 3D color form in weekly basis on the news. It's daily, right? George, I mean, there's so many we can name. I mean, what is
yes,
that?
yes. Well, it's important. I mean, it's certainly tragedy. It's certainly horrific. It certainly just shakes our very core of humanity. And even for those of us that are in the faith, based, if we have any kind of spirituality about us or any kind of foundation, it shakes that
Yeah.
to see the George Floyds of the world, the Philando Castiles getting shot down, the Sean Bells, the Oscar Grants, um, the Jamar Clarks, the Breonna Taylor,
Mm.
the Ahmaud Arbery. It's continuing. There's this thick, bold line that goes from Emmett, and even those before Emmett. I don't want to say that these type of murders just started with Emmett Till, but the whole, I would say, the intersection of, and the collaboration of media, outrage, and a call to action, sort of all came together like in 1955.
Right. Right.
And God rest the souls of all those others that have their demise has been met by injustice
Mm.
and silence. As it just shakes me up because I know that there are other families like ours that are still fighting for justice. I know that there's 152 or so families and victims on the list of the Unsolved Civil Rights Crimes Act that right now is with the Department of Justice.
Mm.
The Unsolved Civil Rights Crimes Act was a way to recognize the unsolved murders, the cold cases that we still have on the books
Yeah.
that need to be investigated. So from that era of time, civil rights era, if you will, through now, we're I would say we're sitting on a powder keg, if you will, because the outrage, and we saw some of that with George Floyd. We saw the outburst, the outrage, because this has been happening over and over again.
Right.
And we know that it's time. It's time for a reckoning. It's time to right the wrongs of the past, and also look at ways that we can move forward with policies, with reform, with listening to the families of those victims. We rarely hear them
Right.
speak and share their stories, and we're starting to do that with our foundation. In fact, we started in 2005, 15 years ago. Emmett's mother died in 2003, having an inkling that maybe the case would be reopened, but she
Mm.
didn't know, so
Mhm.
she left here not really knowing that the case would be reopened. But Emmett's case was actually reopened in 2004, about a year after she passed. And his body was exhumed in 2005, the same year that we started the foundation. And so we know that it is important to keep um, shouting out his name and encouraging all those other families to continue on this path of justice. This is, we know that if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? And
Right.
fortunately, there are attorneys and others who have come on board and are helping those families today um, demand justice, and using the law that's on their side. We don't have the luxury of some of that. The statute of limitations is
Right.
something that is a barrier for us. But I still hold out a lot of hope, and we have still a lot of energy. We're going to continue to fight, and we're going to continue to look at the laws that need to be corrected, look at the language that's on the books right now, and look at some of the laws that have been there, we've been trying to pass for a while, like anti-lynching
Yeah.
laws, and then new ones, I should say, Eric. We have been proposing the Victims of Racially Motivated Murder Act on a federal level. And then we've been successful in getting the language locally in Minnesota. So the timing is perfect for it.
Right.
And it's called the Emmett Lewis Till Victims Recovery Program. And here's where there's an opportunity to empower the families of those victims. So I don't know
Yeah.
if that answered your question or not,
No,
but
absolutely. Yeah, and actually, to answer one or two down the road, I was going to ask
okay.
about. I do want to ask about the legislation and so forth, but just you know, just to again to humanize Mamie a little bit, like she
Yes.
passed, and obviously, a mother, your heart would never stop breaking, right? Of course, but did she recognize the resonance like that? Did she recognize what that led to with, like you said, Rosa Parks, MLK, and so forth? Did she recognize that that I'm going to use one of your slogans, the tragedy to triumph? Did she did she internalize that? Like, was she, I'm sure she died with a broken heart, but was she in any way redeemed or like healed by the resonance of the tragedy of her son?
I think for Mamie, it was important for her not to carry any hate
Hmm.
in her heart. I mean, she certainly wanted justice. She certainly wanted accountability. She wanted forgiveness from the state of Mississippi.
Hmm.
She wanted to right the wrongs as well. But she didn't have any bitterness.
Right.
She turned her tragedy into a triumph by helping young people. She started something called the Emmett Till Players, where she helped young people who were afraid to even speak. She brought them from being stutterers to being fearful, shy, to speaking out, and she trained them in all of Martin Luther King's speeches, and she
Man.
took them all across the country. So she poured her life into them, and she also went back to school. She became a teacher. She earned her master's degree. So she was empowered, and she was powered by Emmett's memory, by
Yeah.
also the injustice, and understood her place. Even though, like I said, there was no blueprint, there was no one for her to follow
Right.
behind, but she was a spiritual woman, and she knew that her belief in God and her belief in her role, was all being guided, by her strong spiritual and faith foundation. So she was an empowering person with a lot of presence and
Mm.
power, and you never really saw her carry that grief for a long time. She was a
Right.
strong woman, but
That's
strong, determined, and I think she understood her role, and she carried that very well. She carried it very well.
amazing. Here, here. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes,
So I want to move forward on what your foundation does, and again, text Emmett to 243-725. You'll get a link for a petition. Please sign that. I'll post the links in the comments as well. The website is Emmett Till Legacy Foundation .com, right?
correct.
Um,
Yes.
and you have all kinds of stuff up here, right? So you mentioned
Yes.
it here, what you do, encouragement, advocacy. Here are your ongoing programs, including a scholarship, um, you know, annual campaigns. There's a store on here. All your social links are here: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. The store, you have awesome, tasteful products for sale. Obviously, you can donate here, all your activities. So I encourage everyone to come here and, you know,
Thank
uh,
you.
like all the links, make a donation, donate $1 million. If you're Oprah and you're watching this, donate $1 million, right?
That'd be
And
awesome.
right,
That
and
would be awesome.
for the text campaign, it's Emmett to 243-725. This is the link you'll get, and you just fill it out. And this is in an attempt. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit more about what this petition, what your hope is in achieving, with this?
Yes, well, it's an opportunity for us as a family to push forward something that we think is very doable. We worked with other experts out there, and we said, how can we get justice for Emmett? What more can we ask for?
Hmm.
And we know that Carolyn Bryant is still alive, and there were never any charges brought against her. She has a role to play in Emmett's murder, and we think that the Department of Justice, who, they don't have the statute of limitations is something that they don't have control over, but the federal government has done an investigation, and they put forth that investigation, put it in the hands of the DA in Mississippi but in 2007, the DA decided not to bring any charges against Carolyn. There was a grand jury that was held, but now we're saying, listen, the statute of limitations on murder, there is none. So
Right.
let's look at who is in charge today. So we have Lynn Fitch, who is the Attorney General in Mississippi. And then we have the DA, which is Dwayne Richardson. We need to appeal to them to do the right thing. Bring the charges against Carolyn Bryant. If you need to host a grand jury, do that. But we need to have transparency. We need to have accountability. It's been 65 years, and we think we've held our breath long enough. And as we look at Breonna Taylor's case, and we see the history of what happened with Mr. Cameron, and his, I would say, not such a strong didn't build such a strong case for Breonna.
You're being very polite.
Yeah, well, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I know.
They're looking at the transcript. We want to look at the transcripts too, from 2007, Joyce Childs, who was the DA at that time. And we know, that, having this political appointments, we know sometimes people lose their way. And we're saying to Lynn Fitch, and we're saying to Dwayne Richardson, listen, we need you to be transparent, help us to look at what went wrong in 2007 and help us now to right those wrongs, bring those charges against Carolyn Bryant, at least, make her accountable and answer to what happened to Emmett that night. Now, yes, she's elderly, but she can still answer to what happened. So we need to know that. And then if there's adjudication, if there's a jury trial, so be it. Let's let justice work. And we truly think, Eric, that if we can do this in Emmett's case, so we can do this 65 years later, we think there is a pathway to justice for others as well. And so it just takes courage. It takes them using their position, their power, to do the right thing. And that's all we urge them to do. Now, we in that particular petition, that's what we're asking for, and we're appealing to them. We're asking the public to sign the petition to help us. The next phase, though, of this is similar to Breonna Taylor's case. We want to look at what happened in 2007. We want the transcripts to be made public, or at least to be given to our family. We think we deserve it. We think we truly do.
Absolutely. So again, it's text Emmett to 243-725, Emmett with 2 M's and 2 T's. I always have to, so text and sign that petition. I implore you to do so, make a donation. The thing about it is, like, the clock is running out on her. You mentioned she's elderly, and I understand, like, she recanted it, and there's like some ambiguity about, it wasn't necessarily taped and so forth, but, like, with pressure, like you say, we can make this happen. Like, it's not too late to seek the justice that Emmett deserves. And, but the time is running out to get some of those answers. So, get involved in this case. I want to, you mentioned Breonna Taylor's case, and that brings me to, Kentucky, right? So she was in Kentucky, and, the lynching bill is held up by Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, right?
Yes.
That bill, I think they've put forward legislation, anti-lynching legislation, like hundreds of times, right? And we're at this one crossroads where this one guy can hold that up for whatever reason, right? It's about language, and he's saying language, right? But that, I'm saying this, not you. It seems like BS to me, but will you, and God, I hope Charles Booker runs in 2022. Like, Rand Paul his term is up in 2022. Charles Booker ran the primary to go against Mitch McConnell, and Godspeed. I hope Charles Booker runs against Rand Paul in 2022. That was a long way to go to plug Charles Booker, but maybe you and I can.
And we're nonpartisan, as an organization. So we can't support any particular, but what's right is right. And those that have the will, the courage, particularly in today's environment, I don't care what party you're in, you just need to look at the facts and make the right decisions based on the facts, and based on justice. If we talk about justice, but we're just not getting it. Black lives do matter. I can say that unapologetically, and they haven't mattered to many in our country. And so until that matters, then all lives will matter. But until Black lives matter, we can't have that. And one of my neighbors even said that to me, a couple of days ago. But one thing I do want to correct and just say that Carolyn Bryant, Don, did not recant her story.
Okay.
Her family did come out and say, no, she's sticking to the lie. So we know that she lied. And I just want the public to understand that. So this is not a case where she's willingly saying and has any sort of softness in her heart towards Mamie. She's sticking to the lie, and she needs to be held accountable.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, there were, I guess that was about 2 years ago where that story went around that she had recanted, and it just kind of, it kind of took up steam. I think even Dave Chappelle cited it, like I mentioned. But yeah, thanks for clearing that up.
Thank you.
Yeah, as far as that legislation, the anti-lynching, it was Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, I think, were the two principals on that. And now we have Kamala Harris heading into the White House. Maybe we have an ally. What is that? Can you respond to that?
Well, I think it's positive. I think that, there was only one person that held it up, so I think we have some opportunity, to push for it. And I think we just need more voices and more people to understand how this could even apply. This lynching bill could apply to Ahmaud Arbery's family as well. So not only, it was named after Emmett, but it just doesn't have that, it has a longer path, towards the future. And I think Senator Paul, was afraid of really the ramifications of it. And there should be ramifications. You lynch someone, you should be held accountable. And I'll tell you, there are modern day lynchings, Eric. There are mysterious cases now where, people have been found lynched. So this is not just the past. I just say, we're continuing to try to build the bridge from the past to the present and the future. But these are things we need to eliminate, and we have to use the policies. And if the policies aren't in place, we need to put the policies in place. And those people that don't support our lives and the policy, they need to go. So I don't care what side of the aisle that they're on. I really don't. But I think that if we stand up for justice, and you've got the voices of many of the families, and I'll tell you, in Minnesota, I have a flyer that has about 400 names of individuals that started from like 1984 through George Floyd. And certainly there's been those after, but there's just in Minnesota alone, police involved shootings or police brutality, if you will, and violence. And I have police in my family, and I love them dearly. But I do know that in every profession, there are issues. And we have a major one that is life-threatening right now. So we do need to look at how we can make some adjustments, in that case. I can't speak to all the reforms that are out there today, because there are others that can talk about that more specifically and more powerfully than me. But all I know is that we need to vote for justice. We need to look at policymakers that understand what justice is, and we need to define it for them. And we need to not exclude the voices of the families of the victims. And we need to really look at how we can continue to empower them. They really need the public's help and support.
Hear, hear. Yeah, and never give up, right? It's never too late. We're still, fighting for justice for Emmett all these years later, right? There's, So again, it's text Emmett to 243-725, Emmett Till Legacy Foundation.com. You can go find them on social media everywhere. Let me just, we'll close on, two things. How people can help, but also your other programs, right? So, the scholarship program, talk about, you have, I guess, annual events, talk about the positive activities that your foundation does.
Yes, well, thank you. Education is very important to us. It was important to Mamie, Emmett's mother, and important to us as well. And we want to create awareness. We have a program called The Power of History, Turning Tragedy into Triumph. And that's where we travel to colleges, universities across the country, even schools, high schools, and others. And we share Emmett's story. We have a documentary that we show called Who Killed Emmett Till? And we engage with young people around the story, what we're doing today, and how they can help going forward. We cannot leave the voices of our young people out. We also have a program called Hear My Voice, Are You Listening? And even with the Power of History, we know in a COVID environment, we are transitioning things from the personal contact to virtual. So even for the 65th anniversary, we did a program, our Hear My Voice, Are You Listening? With young people, just giving them that platform to talk about whatever it is that they wanted to talk about, not managing it or controlling it. And it's a way for us to build this bridge from the past to the present and future, and we're obligated to do that. We also work with, we collaborate with other organizations like Snell and Associates for a program called Justice in Time. And what that is, it's a national interactive program involving communities, community leaders, young people, along with law enforcement and others in a session and a training session around interaction and what defines support, what defines safety, what defines a peaceful interaction, what defines respect and the lack of respect. And so there's this interactive session that we do, and it's very, very powerful. The organization has worked with boys and girls clubs across the country, and it's saved lives, for young people, and it's put people together that have right now are in this polarizing situation and life-threatening situation, put them together so that they can understand each other. And then we are also working on.
Sorry, just to interject on that too. I imagine a component. Of that too is, Mamie was alone in her struggle. Like you said it twice. She didn't have a blueprint, right? Right. Now families, like it's so rampant that you almost need support groups for it, right? So George Floyd's family, or Breonna Taylor's family, and I think of Erica Garner, right? Eric Garner's daughter, right? And Mike Brown Sr. and so forth. Like there's this club that no one wants to be a member of, right? So I imagine foundations like yours serves someone as a support group, and it has a communal benefit to people going through the unspeakable as well. So I'm sorry to interrupt on that.
No. That's very important to note. And for us to move from family to trying to empower others, it's tough, because it's our family. It's that generational pain, that trauma that we are trying to push beyond as well. And sometimes we do it alone. Sometimes we do it with tears in our eyes, and sometimes we feel empowered because someone has contributed to or sponsored some effort that we're trying to do. But I'll tell you, one of our great that it just warms our heart when we name our award, our Women of Courage Award, after Mamie, and we give that to a frontline person like Cori Bush, or we give it to a person like Philando Castile's mom, Valerie Castile, or we give it, one of our first awardees actually was Trayvon Martin's mother, Sabrina Fulton. So it just warms our heart that we can find, and I'm not saying ordinary women in an ordinary way, but ordinary women that do extraordinary things beyond their grief, like Mamie did. So we have something called Loving from the Inside Out, Women's Empowerment Symposium, and that's where we give the Women of Courage Award. So, in the 15 years we've been around, we've tried to push this huge thing up the hill, and we're still doing it. We're still struggling, and we know that there are others that are struggling too, and we want to make sure we help them amplify their voices, like the Atlanta Five. Janice Cameron, they're in Atlanta, whose dad and 4 of his other friends went fishing, Pensacola, Florida, and they came up dead. And there's been no one held accountable for that. So we're going to be, looking at amplifying those voices as well with some of our programming going forward. We even have civic engagement. We think being civically engaged is so important, where it's voting, having a chance to vote. We have Get Out the Vote events, Jazz Jam Justice. We talk about issues that may not work for people.
Right.
We try to amplify that and bring in voices from all sides to help educate, the public. So, many of those things are on our website. We even have a speakers bureau where some of our family members are being asked, to come out and speak. So we're trying to make sure we stay relevant and that Emmett's name is out there, and that we connect the past to the present and future. And we build this bridge, this strong bridge, and we hope that it never happens again. We do have something called the Never Again movement and pledge. So in addition to the petition, if you notice my shirt, it's Justice for Emmett Till. We have a campaign right now where we have voices of some of our most noted authors and activists and artists, like Taye Diggs, for instance, like Lamont Rucker, like Anjanou Ellis, Erica Alexander, and others that are wearing this shirt. And we'll have to get you one, Eric.
I love that.
And other leaders. There are other those that are a part of corporate responsibility. We're hoping, that they'll join us as well. So we're hoping to be a part of the solution, and we have a lot of heart, a lot of energy, but we need a lot of help and a lot of support. Big ideas that we want to push forward. So I appreciate this wonderful opportunity, and to talk about our agenda, our mission, and our mission, I should say, is driven by Emmett Till Mobley. She said, we don't have the luxury of self-pity. We have to move on with the building process. And we have to make sure that our young people are anchored so deeply that if life hits them 7.1 on life's Richter scale, that though they sway, they will not topple. And so we think that about not only our young people, but our community of men, women, and others. And so we just want to be a part of moving things forward, like Mamie did.
Yeah, here, well said. I mean, incredible, and thank you for all the work you do, and keeping your cousin's pursuit of justice active, right? But not only that, the resonance, the ripple effect it has through the communities you mentioned, Corey Bush, Trayvon Martin's mom, like this, it's this series of tragedies, and we have to keep fighting front line, right, to seek justice, to try to prevent the next one, to educate in order to prevent the next one, all of that stuff. It's not a simple thing. Like you said about remaining relevant. Like the ultimate wish would be that it wouldn't be necessary, right? That's the ultimate wish. But until that day comes, like we all have to continually fight this fight and seek justice. And if one errant senator in Kentucky isn't going to step up, then we need to replace him or whatever. Like there's a million fronts in this fight. And Emmett Till Legacy Foundation.com. It's scrolling across the bottom. Text to 243-725 Emmett. Make a donation. You said you have speakers that go out to schools. If you're a person that books speakers at schools, book the Emmett Till Legacy Foundation, right? Have them come out. There's so many ways you can get involved. And I mean, it's just a moving story. Like there's never a point in time. I mean, there's never a point in time where this story can't just break your heart and make you cry, right? Like, it's just so tragic. But, I love that you have that picture hanging behind you, because what a glorious picture of a young spirit, taken obviously far too soon. But
Yes.
yeah, thank you for all the work that you
Thank
do.
you.
Please come back anytime if you have a new initiative that you want to talk about, something else coming up. I want to keep telling the story. We got to keep telling the story. Yeah, and thanks to all your staff, Terry, and everyone on your board and so forth.
And our ambassadors. We have some wonderful young ambassadors that help us as well. So
Amazing.
I want to
Amazing.
give honor to them.
You're here. Well, keep up the good work in Emmett's name, in Mamie's name. You're just speechless. Just thank you for taking the time and sharing it all with me. I'm truly honored. So
Thank you. Thank you
thank
for
you.
having me. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.